The air in the apartment was always thick with Rima's disapproval. It clung to the thin, damp curtains and permeated the silence, making Lizzie's chest tight. Rima was a man whose cruelty was not loud or explosive, but corrosive, a relentless drip, drip, drip of disdain that aimed to dissolve his wife's spirit entirely. "Look at this mess," Rima would sneer, sweeping a hand over the immaculate kitchen counter. "You spend all day here doing what exactly? Wasting my electricity. You're useless, Lizzie. Utterly, fundamentally useless. Can't even manage a clean home." Lizzie would simply dip her head, her thin, dark hair shielding her expression. She knew the counter was clean. She knew the house was spotless. It didn't matter. The names he called her, incompetent, simple-minded, a burden, were the true currency of his control. He used words like shackles. The financial control was just as severe. Rima managed every penny. "Why would you need cash?" he'd ask, his eyes narrowed in suspicion, whenever she dared mention a necessary purchase, like new tires for the old car he rarely let her drive, or even a pair of shoes to replace her worn-out flats. "Everything you need is here. If you want things, you should go out and earn them." "Oh wait, you can't. Because no one would hire a dreary thing like you." He was proud of his financial stranglehold. It was the physical manifestation of her dependence, his ultimate proof of her worthlessness. Lizzie hadn't worked since they married 10 years ago, and with every passing year, her confidence in re-entering the professional world withered under his constant verbal assault. The cycle was perfect for Rima. He crushed her self-esteem, which made her less likely to seek work, which then validated his claim that she was useless, which justified the financial restriction. The human spirit is a stubborn thing, and the well of Lizzie's endurance was finally beginning to run dry. It was not a grand moment of defiance, but a slow, quiet realization one evening as she scrubbed a saucepan while Rima watched a football game, laughing loudly at his own jokes. She was not just tired, she was disappearing. She looked at her reflection in the stainless steel, a ghost of a woman with tired eyes, and knew she had to build a lifeboat, even if it meant doing it in the dark. She started small. On the few nights Rima went out with his friends, Lizzie didn't clean, she studied. She secretly revived her old, forgotten certifications in project management and finance. She used the library's public computers, deleting her browsing history meticulously before returning home. When Rima was home, she hid her phone under the bed, researching job boards and rewriting her resume, detailing skills she hadn't used in a decade. Her initial applications were met with silence. Rima noticed her renewed energy, interpreting it as defiance. "You're getting a little mouthy lately, aren't you, Lizzie?" he had remarked one morning, his voice dangerously low. "A little too comfortable. Maybe I should stop filling the fridge if you think you have time to start ignoring my instructions." The threat was chilling, but it only strengthened her resolve. She wasn't ignoring him, she was becoming invisible to him. She mastered the art of looking vacant and agreeable while her mind was calculating salary expectations and interview strategies. Then, 3 weeks after she had her third, and most promising, interview, one Rima knew nothing about, having been disguised as a necessary dental appointment, the email arrived. It was 11:37 a.m. Rima was at work. Lizzie was sitting at the worn kitchen table, ostensibly sorting old bills. Her phone buzzed silently on the wood. She almost ignored it, trained to not let anything distract her from the pretense of her domestic tasks. The night before her planned departure, Rima came home drunk, stumbled into the living room, and demanded his dinner. "It's not ready yet," Lizzie said, her voice completely even. He blinked at her, and used to any response other than instant obedience. "What did you say, you clumsy fool? Get me my food. Now. And while you're at it, I need $200 tomorrow. I ran low this month." Lizzie turned slowly, holding a single, heavy suitcase in her hand. She looked at Rima, really looked at the small, petulant rage animating his face. He looked pathetic, like a king stripped of his velvet robes. She walked past him towards the door, her steps purposeful, the suitcase rolling silently on the tiled floor. "You won't be needing that," Lizzie said, stopping at the threshold. She opened her small, new wallet, a gift from the firm, she realized, and pulled out a crisp, $100 bill. She dropped it on the worn Persian rug. "That's for the electricity bill I supposedly wasted. The rest of the money, Rima, you can earn yourself. Just like I did." Rima's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The sheer shock of her insolence paralyzed him. Lizzie didn't wait for him to recover. She stepped out and closed the door with a gentle, definitive click. She walked down the steps and got into the small, second-hand car she had purchased with her signing bonus. The next morning, Rima awoke to silence. The silence of the house that was usually broken by the soft clatter of Lizzie making his coffee, ironing his shirts, and waiting for his insults. He stormed into the kitchen. She was gone. Her side of the closet was empty. Only her silence remained, amplified tenfold. Rima roared her name, but the sound echoed back at him, a useless noise in an empty space. He was left with the immaculate counter, the half-empty fridge, and the devastating realization that the useless, dreary thing he had spent 10 years trying to break had finally found her worth. Meanwhile, Lizzie drove toward the sunrise, a senior financial coordinator, breathing the clear, expensive air of freedom. The change in her life was immediate and profound. Her days were now structured by purpose, not fear. At Veritas Solutions, her sharp analytical mind, long dormant, earned her respect and rapid promotions. She was Lizzie, the insightful analyst, not Lizzie, the clumsy fool. But Rima's descent was as swift and deserved as Lizzie's rise. Without Lizzie managing his life, paying his bills, organizing his appointments, keeping his schedule, Rima's careful facade of competence collapsed. His office job required precision and attention, two things his escalating drinking habit and raging resentment now destroyed. He missed deadlines, alienated clients with his brusque manner, and began arriving late, smelling faintly of cheap liquor. The final straw came during a critical quarterly review meeting. Rima, still stewing over his vanished wife, snapped at a vice president who questioned his figures. 2 days later, he was escorted out of the building. Fired. The loss of income spiraled into disaster. Rima had always been a spendthrift, believing his money was endless. He had no savings, only debt accrued from his flashy car payments and forgotten utilities Lizzie used to pay. Without the mortgage payments, the house went into foreclosure. His friends, the same ones he used to mock for their financial shortcomings, quickly tired of his desperate requests for cash and his bitter complaints about Lizzie, vanishing just as she had. Within 6 months, Rima found himself entirely alone and homeless. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a dull, aching confusion. He was the useless one now, a man in a perpetually stained jacket, haunting the shadowed alcoves of the city he once sneered at. He became a street beggar, holding out a grubby hand, his once proud voice reduced to a mumbled plea for spare change. 2 years later, Lizzie stood beneath a towering oak tree on the sweeping, manicured lawn of one of the country's most prestigious universities. She wore a simple, elegant ivory dress. She wasn't trembling this time, her hands were steady as she placed them into the strong, kind hands of Josh. Josh was a professor of chemistry at the university, a man whose kindness was as foundational as his intellect. They had met during a finance workshop Lizzie led for nonprofit research teams. Josh was presenting his work on sustainable polymers. He had been captivated not by her beauty, though she was beautiful now, radiating confidence, but by her quiet, insightful way of asking questions. He saw her resilience immediately. Their courtship was built on mutual respect, intellectual curiosity, and an easy, genuine laughter Lizzie had forgotten existed. As they exchanged vows, promising a future built on partnership, Lizzie looked out at the assembled crowd. She saw her new colleagues, her supportive friends, and a future brighter than the sunrise she had driven toward that first day. The wedding reception was held in the university's botanical garden. As the sun set, illuminating the happy scene, Lizzie and Josh walked hand in hand past a high stone wall that bordered the campus. Behind that wall, huddled in the shadow of a grand limestone building, sat a broken man. He was arguing with himself over the last few coins in his hand, his coat pulled tight against the damp evening air. His face, once defined by smug authority, was now obscured by a patchy beard and the grime of the street. It was Rima. Lizzie did not see him. She was focused entirely on Josh, listening to a loving, slightly nerdy explanation of the chemical process that makes champagne bubble. She was no longer looking back at the prison Rima had built, but forward, stepping into a life defined by warmth, worth, and the liberating knowledge that she had finally found not just her freedom, but her equal.